The economy is the healthiest that it's ever been. Our labor market is rock solid. All of these statements that I have heard 100 times over this past month have been driving me absolutely insane because it is all bullshit. Hello, everybody. My name's True Demon, and I'm the Devil's Stockbroker. I'm making this video to cover some of the latest facts and figures of our economy's state right now because for the last several months, we've been getting the same runaround from the Fed, from the president, from the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, and literally every other main talking head from mainstream media about how strong the goddamn consumer is. I'm so sick of hearing about how strong the consumer is because it's all a lie. There is no way, looking at the data that is in front of us, if anybody could actually read and understand it, that you would ever conclude that the consumer is strong. And in this video, I want to cover all of the information that Americans should actually be aware of to know just how deep a pile of shit we are in. And the fact that it was the Fed, the president, the Treasury, and everybody on Wall Street that brought us to this point. They did so deliberately. They knew what they were doing. They've been dragging us through the mud the entire time with them, cracking the whip as they told us to produce, produce, produce. And now that we're not and we're finally at the breaking point, they just throw their hands up in the air and say that we're just a bunch of depressed, gloomy, and grumpy millennials. And you know what? I'm tired of it. So here in this video, I'm going to cover the facts and show you exactly what is going on between all of the banks and why we're in this situation in the first place. If you haven't already, please like the video, hit subscribe, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for the ride of your life.
Bank of America, they do, okay, so they missed by 2 cents, but revenue up 6%, expenses only up 1.5%. That's called leverage, David. That's good.
So first off, Jim, this isn't leverage. This is a reduction of their expenditure because they're laying off people, something that everybody on Wall Street is fucking talking about, but Bank of America just refuses to admit.
It is good, and we're going to keep an eye on those stocks. As Jim mentioned, of course, Citi was a very strong performer on Friday. Well, there you can see what we're looking for Goldman. As for Moynihan, he is certainly the gentleman who runs Bank of America, and by the way, has done so now for quite a long period of time. We do look to him as well for sort of some commentary on the consumer, given their broad credit card platform and a lot of other areas that they see consumer spending. Didn't really share that much in the call, guys, but did say for the first 2 weeks of July, spending's up 10 plus and transactions again rising 6%. So transactions up 6. That's that's on credit cards, I believe, right? And 10% on spending. Strong consumer resilience is what Moynihan is talking about.
I got news for you guys. Moynihan is talking out of his fucking ass. He's saying whatever is going to make his bank stocks survive whatever the hell is coming for them so that their institutional investors can get the hell out of their positions while there's still some value in them. The same thing happened in the 2008 crash. Just before it, they started raising their dividends. They started talking up about how a recession is the farthest thing from what's going to happen. The consumer is strong, the housing market is strong, and that no matter what happens, American consumers will be able to bounce back from it. But they didn't. They didn't. Instead, what happened, assholes like Moynihan started laying off people and giving themselves raises while everybody else went homeless on the streets because they couldn't afford to pay their fucking mortgages, and they went into foreclosure because the fucking housing crash that you all created through the subprime crisis put us upside down in our fucking mortgages. Absolutely do not believe a word of what Moynihan says. He has a huge conflict of interest, and he has no incentive to tell you the fucking truth.
He says they do continue to see shifts in what people are spending money on, something we've talked about a great deal of late. A lot more on experiences, a lot more on travel, and obviously a bit more on fuel due to increased prices.
The prices of all of these things, experiences, travel, fuel, all because of inflation, something that is hitting the lower class consumer the hardest right now. And that is why these fuckers are so out of touch, because they have no idea what it is like to live on the bottom rung of society.
You also find the account openings really incredible. I'm starting to feel like that they're taking share from the fintechs. Their digital is 48% of their banking. One of the things, they continue to reduce the expense rate at the branches. They have fewer branches, but they're doing more. Look, is it exciting?
No.
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 Not
And when I
excited.
go over with Brian, all Brian really wants to talk about is the consumer is just very strong. And when you hear Carl, you start thinking, does this make the Fed's job harder? Because when the consumer is strong, then you're going to have them chasing goods. At the same time, I went back and forth with Ivy Zellman, who's the dean of housing. Cancellations have jumped big.
Yes.
Ever since the mortgage rate started it started just exploding.
Yes.
Rocket ship.
Yes.
People are walking away. They don't want their homes.
They are. It's
That's positive.
It's on my list
Anyway,
here.
Wilson, yeah.
Well, it's not positive, but
Well,
maybe
I mean,
it's
you know
getting
what
us
I mean.
No, Jim, it's not fucking positive that people are walking away from the deals on their homes because nobody can afford anything. Nobody in America right now can afford to buy a home. That is the struggle that we have been dealing with for the last 10 years, ever since the entire system fucked us in 2008. They haven't made up for it. They've only made things more and more expensive. And let me tell you something else. You haven't kept up with wages either. So all of these things are starting to come to a head, and everybody's feeling it right now, except you. The reality of this hasn't even fucking entered into your head yet because you still make a six-figure salary. You're paid off by everybody who tells you what the hell to say so that you parrot out whatever the fuck Wall Street wants you to tell the average consumer and the average investor because they'll listen to you, Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, and fucking Joe Biden, even though they don't have a clue what the hell is going on, because the education and finance in America is so damn useless.
Yeah.
Negative.
But I mean, on that point, Jim, there was, the conversations that I'll have with a lot of asset managers goes along those lines. The world's decelerating very quickly.
Yes.
We're seeing it in so many different signs, including home prices, including cancellations, which you just cited. Right. Consumer sentiment is terrible.
Yes, it is.
And
It's the lowest in 40 years.
Yeah. People are very sad. There's a gloom in this country. It's one of the reasons I wanted Ken Langone to start Mad Money. I think that capitalism is the greatest force for social change. And when we look at Bank of America and we see what they're doing for minority businesses, we just say, okay, look, it's a different world. It's a positive world. Let's not dump on these guys. These guys are really doing something. But you know what happens, Dave? People just say we're going in the wrong direction.
The wrong direction? No shit, we're going in the wrong fucking direction. The reason there's so much gloom and depression in this country is because average consumers are paying 9% more for all of the common goods that they need just to survive on top of having to pay 40% more for a home, 45% more average on rent, with the same money they were being paid since 1960. How about the fact that the Pew Research Institute mentioned more than 3 years ago that wages haven't budged in decades since the 1960s? And because of inflation, now it's even worse. Now our wages aren't worth back when they were in 1954. We are actually at a point where our wages are less than our grandfathers after World War II. And by the way, of all the people whose ego you're gonna fucking stroke on national television, why does it have to be David Solomon, the same son of a bitch who was overseeing Goldman Sachs at the time in 2008 when they decided to sell all of their toxic MBS and securities off to a whole bunch of American pension funds for hardworking blue collar Americans, and then turned around and shorted the fucking pension funds knowing that they were going to fail. They knew that all the securities that they were selling to all of those pension funds were so bad that there was absolutely no way that they would be able to survive the fallout when they failed. David Solomon is a scumbag. He is anything but charitable. He preys on the weak, just like every other leech on Wall Street has always preyed on hardworking Americans and their pensions. And you actually expect hardworking Americans to digest this fucking shit sandwich delusion that you're feeding to us? It's unbelievable.
We may be going the wrong direction, and maybe people aren't buying that much at retail, but the consumer's balance sheet's amazing. If they're going the wrong direction, at least they're not going to be off the cliff.
This same narrative is being pushed by every talking head on all mainstream media, as well as all of the major figures in our economy. Between Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen and President Joe Biden, everybody is talking about how optimistic the economy is, how great everything is. The fact that the two negative quarters of GDP absolutely means nothing for a recession, even though that is not only the dictionary definition of what a recession is, it's also the widely held standard of the biggest indicator of a recession. Our yield curve has inverted not only on the 2 to 10 year, but also on the 6 month and the 3 month. Jim Cramer claims that somehow the balance sheet of average consumers is just fine, even though our personal savings rate is at a 13-year low, the worst that it's been since 2009, right after we came out of the worst crash in our history because of the subprime crisis. And the current credit card and revolving debt is skyrocketing like it has been for the last several years, but it's really begun to take off now. This downturn has been entirely falsified because of all of the credit lending that was going on during the Fed's bailout period. Ever since they started tightening everything up, it's been going through the roof, and everyone's back to using their credit cards just as much as they have been before, except now they're relying on them in order just to stay afloat and not just as a revolving plan for credit building. And one more time, let's not forget that the inflation is up at 9%. And one of the biggest things that they are ignoring altogether is that delinquencies are rising. The chart doesn't say so because it's a quarterly figure. It's incredibly long lagging. This actually is so much worse because we know that from all the news releases from all the major banks. ABC7 Chicago, just to name one source, is already posting headlines about consumers that are increasing their credit card usage as a direct result of inflation. According to a recent study by NerdWallet, 43% of credit card holders don't know the interest rate on their credit cards, so you have a whole bunch of Americans that don't even understand the meaning of credit or what it actually costs them year over year to hold any debt on their credit card balance. If you even just look at the Federal Reserve's government webpage on consumer credit, outstanding, you look month over month and you notice that there is this constant increase ever since the first quarter of 2021 after the Fed started to pull back on all of the relief funding for every average consumer. Notice how the deposits and all of the current debt, the current credit outstanding has only been rising. And you factor that in with all of the revolving and non-revolving debt that's been increasing just in this past quarter alone. What infuriates me more than absolutely anything that's being said is just the hardcore denial by everybody who is in power, who has the ability to say something, who is able to do something, just absolutely refuses to acknowledge the reality in which we find ourselves. And they continue to push this narrative that the economy's fine, that the labor market's strong, and just everything is fine. Nobody panic, nobody prepare for anything because that would be too intelligent. No, their only focus is just reducing the panic in order to keep the populace placated just long enough so that they can prevent the market from crashing altogether and wiping out everybody at the same time. The problem with the denial approach is that they're not just denying it with their words, they're denying it with their actions. They're deluding themselves by not raising the rates as rapidly as necessary in order to actually combat inflation. They're even encouraging other members of the local governments and state governments to start issuing checks to people as if that isn't the direct cause of inflation in the first fucking place. And just these statements by Janet Yellen here in this latest news story from CNBC, just just take a listen.
And now we have new global growth concerns, especially spillover effects on Europe and a potential slowdown in the economy there. So how do we, the U.S., escape stagflation or worse, recession?
So, we've got a good, strong economy. And when we had January, February months in which employment growth has been exceptionally strong. Even this morning's report on unemployment insurance claims, they remain very low. We've got a good, strong labor market, many, many job openings.
Here's the problem with this theory. Unemployment is a massive lagging indicator, and initial jobless claims don't actually show up until a month after the effect. This chart has been pointed to more than anything other by the Fed, by the Treasury, and by the President's cabinet, is that the unemployment rate is so low. But the thing is that they are delaying it by an entire quarter. The data is so slow to actually arrive, it is damn near useless. And this is the only thing that they are using to prop up this narrative that the labor market is strong, that initial jobless claims are low, and that job openings are consistently high. But here's the problem. The Fed also provided these PPP loans, which was an entire farce in and of itself, because the PPP loans, the terms of these by which businesses were able to get these subsidized loans, which are basically interest-free, free money that all these businesses were able to soak up from the government, they were given on the terms that they needed to at least increase their hiring. But the only terms of this was that they needed to have job openings. They had to list openings and they had to be interviewing staff, potential staff. But here's the thing, there was actually no follow-up to make sure that they were actually hiring anybody, that they were putting people on staff. And there's stories of this over and over and over again of all these businesses that put help wanted signs up that were receiving PPP loans, and they never hired anybody through the entire pandemic. They just sat on their asses collecting checks from the government, and they're still receiving money for this. They still aren't paying back these loans. They've basically been wiped out, especially for the ones that took out the largest lump sums. It's fucking insanity.
Households in good financial shape. We're celebrating this week the 1-year anniversary of the American Rescue Plan. And, this is a piece of legislation that served to bring unemployment down and provoke the strongest growth we've had in 40 years. And we've got a good, strong economy with an excellent outlook for the labor market and real activity going forward. Inflation is a problem, and it's
So this is exactly what I'm talking about. She refers directly to the rescue plan, and that is exactly what that did. It provided a whole bunch of free money, dumped it onto businesses, especially businesses that absolutely had no need of it, and they were able to just start up this hiring program, big air quotes around that one, where they just started posting all these job openings and all these help wanted signs everywhere, but nobody was hiring anybody. And the jobless claims, totally pointless, because it doesn't count anybody who just gives up on looking and people who decide to go and turn to odd jobs, taking cash underneath the table in order to make ends meet, because nobody's actually hiring anybody. And here's the thing, you can't qualify for unemployment if you got let go and your unemployment's expired. All the people that were let go back then, they're they're still stuck, okay? The ones who got stuck, let go all that time ago, that were never able to get their jobs back, had to go and take something lower paying, they're still stuck. And if you're taking a part-time job, you're not counted amongst those statistics, and you're not able to qualify for unemployment the same way that a salaried employee is. So those people are still screwed and sitting on all this rotating debt that they're just trying to keep up with and barely keeping their heads above water while their families drown around them. There's more Americans now are struggling with food insecurity. People are not able to even afford bread, which is up to $5 a goddamn loaf. It's insane. And this is how out of touch that people like Janet Yellen, President Biden, Jim Cramer, everybody, all of these politicians, they have no fucking clue what people are dealing with down on the streets. Everybody on the street level is struggling to survive that's making less than a $50,000 income every single year. And all these people who are barely hanging on by their fingernails over a cliff, just struggling, asking for help, and now they're just getting just kicked in the dick every single day by these freaking gas prices. The repo market for cars is just the final nail in the coffin. Now, all these people are not only struggling with paying for gas, now they can't pay for their cars. This Barron's report here it was just one of the first ones, but second week of July, the car repos started going absolutely off of the charts. This report goes on to say, the job report and minutes from the Federal Reserve's June meeting were the economic highlights of the week, but they are relatively a lagging indicator and old news. This column instead digs into the auto market, where there's an underappreciated ticking time bomb. Lucky Lopez is a car dealer who's been in the business for about 20 years. In recent meetings with bankers where he bids on repossessed vehicles before they go to auction, he's noticed some common characteristics of the defaulted loans. Most of the loans on recently repossessed cars originated during 2020 and 2021, whereas origination dates are normally scattered because people fall on hard times at different times. Loan to value ratios, or the amount financed relative to the value of the vehicle, are around 140% versus the more normal 80%. Many of the loans were extended to buyers who had temporary pops in income during the pandemic. That's people who were getting checks from the government and they relied on those stipends. They were relying on the bailouts and they didn't have a way to keep up with their spending. They splurged because they didn't know how to handle their money, and it's an unfortunate reality, and I feel really sorry for those people, but the education and finance in America is absolutely terrible. The financial literacy of the average American is awful. And I'm not saying that to get down on people. I'm speaking objectively. People don't know how to handle their money in America. We're addicted to debt, and this is the direct result of it. And this is going to lead to the next biggest crash in our economy. It is happening right now. Going on to say, those monthly incomes fell, sometimes by half, as pandemic stimulus programs stopped, and now they look even worse on an inflation-adjusted basis. Like I said, up 9%, and as the prices of basics in particular are climbing. Part of the problem is that some consumers' incomes were temporarily high as the pandemic brought about debt forbearance, pandemic stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment benefits, and in some cases, forgiveness from loans for paycheck protection programs. Again, here we come up with the PPP loans. Lopez says he recently bought a Bentley, McLaren, and 2 Aston Martins, all purchased by buyers using PPP money as down payments, and all repossessed after few or no monthly payments. Another recent acquisition, a Silverado, repossessed from a borrower with a solid 700 credit score who made only 2 payments. Banks' auto lending standards, meanwhile, went out the window, and then lenders jumped on the bandwagon of overpaying for cars, Lopez says. Everybody thought the free gravy train would never end. And this is the insanity that has brought about our entire economic situation. Addicted to debt. Everyone is addicted to debt, and nobody believes that there will be consequences down the road. And here they are. Now we have a frickin' out of control repo market. Used cars are taking off in price because the new car market isn't able to bring about enough actual cars because of the chip shortage. And so everybody who was in a situation where they needed to get a car and couldn't afford it decided to turn to a loan that they wouldn't ever be able to afford to pay back. Or worse, they turned to fraud, picking out PPP loans and figuring out some way to negotiate themselves past the application in order to get enough money to go and get themselves a car. Now, what happens when they all get repossessed? What happens when people who are out of work or barely hanging on to work suddenly lose their only source of transportation? This problem is just getting entirely out of control, and people that didn't prepare, didn't insulate themselves, and believed that all of the debt forbearance that they were receiving was never going to end and that they would never have to pay their debts back eventually, they are going to be screwed. They're going to be trapped, and they're going to lose their only source of transportation. Next, they're going to lose their jobs as a direct result of that, and as a direct result of that, they're going to lose their homes. And that's the consequences that follow one after another. And when it rains, it pours. And the fact that it's happening all across America, all at the same time, tells us that the consumer is not fine. We are not fine. And everybody that is talking about how fucking fine we are on national television is fucking spoon feeding you bullshit, and everybody's been eating it up for the last 6 months. The article goes on to say, now Lopez says that he's never seen so many people making $2,500 a month owing $1,000 a month in car payments. That's about double the maximum portion of income many financial advisors recommend allocating towards a car payment. Quote, the idea that the economy is strong, anyone who's actually doing business sees things are not strong, says Lopez. We had a housing bubble in 2008, and now we have an auto bubble. Oh, don't worry, Mr. Lopez. We have a housing bubble too. The housing bubble is even more out of control. As I mentioned, our median house price is now coming up almost to $500,000, and it still hasn't relaxed yet because everybody went absolutely fucking nuts during the pandemic, deciding that, oh God, now the supply of homes is gone. What am I going to do? Where am I going to get a home? Well, tell you what, that was bullshit too, because it wasn't actually an undersupply of homes. It was an over exuberance of investors, real estate investors, that started gobbling up all the homes thinking they were going to make a fortune on rent. So they took out these stupid PPP loans, started buying up rental properties, and then tried to fill them with tenants that actually weren't able to pay the exorbitant costs. Just to prove the point that I'm not the only person who thinks this, here's a piece by anchor John Yang from PBS News to tell you exactly the situation that the entire housing and rent crisis is right now.
In today's highly competitive housing market, millions of Americans are priced out of buying a home, often competing with all-cash offers well above asking prices. And rents are skyrocketing too, causing overall housing affordability to collapse at its fastest rate on record. Robin Farzad is host of Public Radio's Full Disclosure. Robin, thanks for joining us. What's going on here? What's driving this?
So many peculiar perfect storms coming out of this great pandemic of 2020. Could anybody have romanced how much we'd have this renaissance and interest in staying at home, work from home? People who are on the fence about selling their homes or aging out of their homes suddenly not just are adding to their homes right now, but are buying homes in satellite markets. Parallel to that, you had interest rates taken down to really attractive levels, and people could get a 3% mortgage. And in a broader sense, the mobility of the workforce, the great unlock of going from high price markets in New York and California to places like Miami or Asheville, North Carolina, and Austin. And that's caused a tremendous kind of sluicing of hot money into these markets where you just never had the inventory.
And interest rates, you mentioned interest rates are low. They're creeping up, but they're still at historic lows. Mortgage applications at a 22-year low now, but at the same time, rents are skyrocketing. How does that work?
There's a shortage of affordable housing. If you were thinking that I'm going to husband cash and save for years in a starter home or a starter rental type thing in order to, if you had price in mind, suddenly that price in many cases was blown out of the water because mortgage rates were so low, because you had such a piping hot housing market. And John, on top of that, home builders did the rational thing and pulled back drastically after the great financial crisis. We thought that that was going to be a generational overhang. And so now we're paying for the decisions that were kind of made in the fog of 2009 and 2010. Millennials have come to the market. They see boomers hanging on to inventory longer. And so you have a generation of people that are locked out of affordable housing and have no choice but to pay rent and pay ever more rent.
Is anyone benefiting from this?
Investors, Wall Street, I mean, those who are able to show up with cash. You see these signs outside of homes. There are people that come in and buy them, and they'll buy your homes and turn them around and sell them into the institutional market. We've seen small flippers, hard money loan lenders. We've seen the largest of buyout firms and private equity firms involved, because this is a generational megatrend.
You talked about how the inventory dropped because builders stopped building after the real estate bust. Is there likely to be a sort of a pendulum shift in this? Will they start building again?
When you see things happen, such as people showing up even at the whisper of a home being listed to be able to put in enormous preemptive bids, foregoing a home inspection, of course, housing developers are going to enter the fray. I have a dead mall near my house here in Richmond, Virginia, and the Sears was raised, and you have luxury condominiums and apartments put there. That's cold comfort for people who need affordable housing, but it shows you that the market wants to meet a demand. You do need policy solutions to make sure that people aren't kind of doomed to becoming a generation of kind of usurious renters. Some of these rents have gone up in such chunky terms. You look at markets like Los Angeles, where there's a concurrent homelessness problem, Manhattan, Miami, where it's just become arguably one of the most unaffordable markets in the United States, largely because out-of-towners have come in with hot New York and California dollars, and there's really nothing that locals with their pay scales can do.
This is exactly the trend that's happening across America. It's not even just Miami or Los Angeles. It's Phoenix, Arizona. It's Portland, Oregon. It's Washington, D.C. It's the outskirts of Virginia. It's all over the place. It's all in the Sunbelt markets. And every single one of these major metropolitan areas is in the same trend. And yes, millennials are pissed. I'm fucking pissed. My rent went up 11% overnight. And where did they say that all of this money was coming from? New York and California. That's exactly where. You have the California people that were trying to escape from California taxes and get to a cheaper housing market, sell their overpriced homes and get into somewhere else that was more comfortable and away from all of the densely populated major metro cities. And then you have people coming from New York, big investors, everybody with a wealth, just all cash, ready to put down on 5 to 10 homes at a time. Major Wall Street firms, Blackstone, BlackRock, and Vanguard. Everybody that was in the real estate market that had cash available to buy started absolutely just decimating the consumer's affordability for a home. But now things have turned around in the completely opposite direction. Now they realize they don't actually have a way to flip these homes. They don't have anybody who's willing to actually pay for them at this price. This whole situation perfectly describes a perfect storm of events. We have a rent crisis, a housing crisis, an economic crisis, an auto crisis, a loan crisis, and a credit crisis, and all coming at the same time while all of the major banks in the United States are caught with their hands in the fucking cookie jar, all of them committing fraud, and everybody is coming to term. All the politicians now who are thinking about re-election are absolutely screaming with their hair on fire, thinking, how in the hell am I going to get reelected? How the hell am I going to go and get my dues? How am I going to get mine? Fuck you people. Fuck you at the top. Everybody at the top has left everyone else, the 99% wallowing in the fucking mud and the slime, You look down at everybody here on the bottom rung of society that you are standing on the heads of while we are drowning in debt, drowning in your bad policy decisions, drowning in all of the regret that you have left behind in your wake of your terms. And worse yet, all of you motherfuckers that are sitting in the Senate and the House of Representatives have been insider trading, and we know it. You can look at all of their trades on Open Secrets, and every single one of these assholes that have been making millions of dollars in the stock market on top of getting all of their paychecks from American taxpayers, they're also profiting by making decisions and taking votes collectively, deciding. The only thing that they can ever fucking agree on in a bipartisan manner is something that they're going to profit from because they all got into long positions in the fucking stock market before they voted on it. Like the American Rescue Plan, like the CHIPS deal, and every other fucking incentive program that they ever shoved down our throats at the same time. Every single stock trade that has been made by the Pelosi family has absolutely been knocked out of the park. They're magicians. I don't know how they could possibly do this without insider trading, and it's not a coincidence that every single time that there was a major bill on the semiconductors going on, Paul already had a position because Nancy's just passing off all the information. They're not the guiltiest party, but she's the fucking Speaker of the House, and she needs to be held to a higher standard than any of them because she is the leader of the House. She speaks for the House of Representatives, and she is just a great big beacon of fraud that is shining out to all four corners of the fucking globe, letting everyone know elsewhere how fraudulent America is and how corrupt our government's become because everybody's more concerned about actually filling their fucking pockets and their bank accounts rather than taking care of business and making sure that our country is run efficiently, effectively, and for the commonwealth of the people. And this is precisely why websites like Unusual Whales and its I Am the Senate insider trading from Congress needs to be put in the fucking spotlight. This is exactly what is wrong with us. We continue to elect these fucking peons that have no idea how anything works on the bottom rung of society for the 99%. They don't understand the fundamentals of economics. They don't understand anything about what it's like to live the way that we do. They don't know what it's like to work for a living. All they know how to do is how to argue with each other, make it look good for the television and C-SPAN while they're making all these insider trades on the back end, making themselves filthy fucking rich off of our backs, our taxpayer dollars, entirely subsidized by the American public. Just take, for example, the fact that the Pelosi's have gone from one of the poorest to overnight one of the richest families in politics, and they did it all through stock trading. Or how about the fact that Congress was caught trading ahead of the COVID pandemic, knowing that there was actually a pandemic ongoing and keeping the information quiet while they silently got into new positions, and they even delayed their reporting according to the law for Congress trading, and they still never faced any punishment or penalty. What floors me the most about this is that Congress has already forgotten in just a short 2 years how close they came to being completely overthrown by a mob. I want to preface what I'm about to say next by saying I don't condone what happened during the Capitol riots back in 2021, but we need to acknowledge that that event was entirely terrifying. The fact that a single mob spurred on by a jaded former president was enough to send an entire army of armed civilians stampeding through the Capitol building where our Senate does its business and put under threat every single member of our Congress in just a few short hours. This is something that Congress needs to remember. When you have a mob of angry people pounding outside your doors because they realize, for whatever reason, that they're upset with you and you're the reason for their suffering and you are the reason why they are having struggles in their life because of your bad policy decisions and because you've ignored them for so long, that reality apparently is too easily forgotten by you up over there in the Capitol building, because it was only in January of 2021 that a whole mob of them broke through the windows and went storming in there with the intention to do harm. That was a serious, serious event. And if you've forgotten that, then you need a reality check, because right now tempers are so high on the bottom rung of society, all the plebes who are just sitting outside waiting on your decision of how their lives are going to go next. Remember that we are counting on you as the leaders of our society to make decisions for our betterment. And instead, you're making decisions that are going to get you rich. And it's fucked up. And you have no business doing that. That's not your job as a public servant. You have millions of people counting on you, your decisions, and your intellect to lead us into a better tomorrow. And you are neglecting your duty every single day. And Chairman Gary Gensler, I'm speaking to you too. The changes that are being made in the markets are positive, but they're still not happening fast enough. And I know that everybody is putting pressure on the chairman of the SEC to move slower and to go back on his decisions. For one, I think that Gary Gensler is, for all intents and purposes, an intelligent person. I doubt his motives, and I have my own skepticism of him and why he is making the decisions that he is making. I don't entirely believe that he is all for retail, but I do at least believe that he is a man who gets things done, and he's taking backlash for those decisions. As is stated in this Reuters article, Gary Gensler is the kind of regulator who gets things done. But according to them, that's not always the kind that serves America best. I tend to disagree. The fact that the SEC has been basically a lame duck that everybody here just makes fun of and we joke about how useless they are should stand testament to the fact that they aren't really on the side of retail unless they actually have somebody who is determined to cut out all the fraud. The fact that there is so much known fraud on Wall Street and you have a Reuters article backing up the decision to slow the SEC down and prevent them from regulating, as is their intention and their job to do as the watchdogs of the American securities market, really says something about how delusional everybody in the media is right now about this entire situation. Holding companies to account and making sure that the regulations are actually taking effect and are putting the screws on all of the corrupt Wall Streeters is exactly what they are supposed to be doing. And any notion that they need to slow their roll and pull back on the punishment that they're laying down on Wall Street is a complete fallacy. They should be doing more, in my opinion. There should be more people actually going to prison rather than just paying a fine and saying, oh, we admit to no wrongdoing, and then just walking away and going and doing it again the next week. Gary Gensler wants to extend his position as chairperson of the SEC to make it so that the SEC is encouraging companies to respect climate change and make a plan to actually have an impact on the planet's environment. I'm all for that. Why are you talking against that? The fact that we have tarmac over in London melting right now because it's so fucking hot over in Europe should probably alarm some people right now. Maybe it's the kind of thing that actually would take an effect to get things under control. But this is only secondary to the actual problems that we're facing. The SEC hasn't taken any actions against Congress. They haven't taken any actions against any particular Wall Streeters yet. They haven't involved any, as far as I know, any of the members of the DOJ and FBI joint investigation that's going on as part of the RICO investigations against the major banks that have been bad acting and frauding their way to success for the last, Jesus, I don't even know how many decades at this point. The fact that the banks are complaining and calling the chair's policy-making agenda a scorched earth agenda is music to my fucking ears. They should be complaining because the reason they're complaining is that they've been defrauding the American public for decades and decades, and they've never actually had a person in control of the SEC chair that was willing to do anything about it and hold them to account. The thing that I'm trying to get to and explain in this video is that everyone keeps telling us that everything is fine. You know what? It's not fucking fine. We're all sitting on the goddamn bow of the Titanic while it's tipping up and about ready to plunge into the fucking sea. Our economy is in one of the worst situations that it's ever been historically, and everybody's just playing the music in order to keep spirits up high enough while we sink to the bottom of the ocean. The problem with this approach is that it is entirely out of touch with reality. The politicians are trying to reduce panic, and as much as I can respect the desire, it's never worked before. People get wise, but the problem is that they get wise too late, once the building is already on fire and they're trapped inside, and nobody can do anything about it at that point. Instead, we should be actually letting everyone know the situation that we're in. We should actually tell people what to be doing. We should be giving guidance to average everyday Americans of how to save their money, how to protect themselves, and what they should be doing in order to navigate this situation. Why is it that as a society we have chosen to sedate ourselves and pretend like everything is okay even when it's not? You can sit there and you can pretend that the world isn't collapsing around you, but what does that do? You just sit there while the calamity swallows you up and you get trapped in the rubble. Pretending that everything is fine is exactly what brought us into this situation in the first place. The fact that every market crash that we have been in for the last 3 decades was recovered from as a direct result of a bailout from the Fed should tell us exactly what's wrong with our economy. We just got too addicted to debt and we got too used to being bailed out by this money printer, this magical system that was going to just save us from impending doom. But it doesn't work forever. Your prayers are not going to be answered. It doesn't work that way anymore. The fact that our dollar is skyrocketing in inflation and that the dollar's buying power is eroding by the day should tell us something about our decisions and the fact that they haven't worked. We can't continue this way. It's unsustainable. And we've already driven ourselves past the breaking point at this point. I, for one, believe that we're in for a seriously rude awakening, and for people who have not been listening and paying attention to what's going on, things are going to be far worse for them because everybody that's at the top, everyone who has a voice and has any measure of intelligence that could say something, refused to do so. They refuse to let people know exactly what's wrong and exactly what they need to do in order to protect themselves. And there's going to be widespread, far-reaching consequences that's going to decimate future generations economically, politically, societally. It's going to have an effect, and it's going to cause terrible, terrible repercussions for years to come. And as much as I want to believe that as a society, we're above the need for violence in order to get the things that we need, I'm starting to lose confidence. Our politicians, our regulators, and our enforcers that are supposed to be acting for the benefit and the good nature and goodwill and good faith of the American public have failed to do so for so long, ignored our voices, ignored our pleas for help for such a significant length of time. I don't see any other way to get their attention. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said once that riots are the language of the unheard. And if you've noticed, there's been a lot of riots and a lot of people's desires and demands to be treated fairly, to seek transparency, and for justice to prevail over corruption have gone unheard for decades. And now we're at a point where we can't take it anymore. This can't continue. And if nothing's going to be done about it, then everybody in Congress is in for a really hard reality check. For everybody who is here and you're still watching the video, thank you for watching and sticking with me up to this point. If you're wondering what to do, number one, save your money. Not financial advice. I can't tell you what to do. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just an amateur stock investor. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm saving my money. I am pinching every penny that I have in order to prepare myself for what's to come. A depressed housing market, a seriously bad economy, and record inflation that's not going away for a long time. And the only thing that I can do is protect myself. But if I can do something to help you protect yourself, then I'll feel like I'll have done something at least to help other people navigate this firestorm that we're about to walk into. Please consider subscribing to the channel so that you can stay close to the information that I have to offer. And if you want to get more education on how to navigate the seas of this extremely turbulent economy going forward, please consider joining our community at Hell's Trading Floor, which you can join through our Discord at discord.gg/Hell's Trading Floor. We'll be happy to bring you into the fold and to offer you any nugget of knowledge, wisdom, and resources that we have to offer. We're on our own. Congress isn't coming to save us. The Fed's money printer is being shut off, and there is nobody in the world that is going to help you but yourself. We got to do this for ourselves now. We're on our own. But you don't have to be on your own alone. We can help each other, and we're willing to do that by any means necessary. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you at the bell. Until then, have a hell of a time in the markets.